Hello everybody and thanks for tuning in. And what I've got here looks like the normal Eachine E010, but it's actually only kind of a skeleton of that. What we actually have here is a little bit of a Frankenstein build. And I took the E010 and I took the board out, and then I got an F3 flight controller that fits right down in between those hoops. It's an Evo board. And then you just put on your own receiver. In my case, I've got a Spectrum satellite down there. We put our power lead on, our FPV camera, and we go and fly it. And this yields a much more configurable hoop. So if you want to adjust the rates, if you want to tune it a little bit to fly a particular kind of way, we can do that. We just have to plug in the USB port. And you're probably asking yourself, how do you do that? Well, in my case, because I planted it down inside because I wanted the camera kind of flat on top, I actually have to take the camera mount off and kind of pry the board up off the foam tape in order to get USB access. But I've done it a few times. No harm to anything just yet. But there's an alternate option. And I have the build video that follows, but I thought most people would just be interested in seeing this, and they probably know how to do it themselves. So I'll link below to the board. I don't suggest buying these printed mounts from Banggood. They're very, very fragile. I've been through 4, I think, since I started this. Well, since I completed this build, and I've been enjoying it. It doesn't take much to break them. So I'm going to keep breaking them until I'm done with them, and then I'll get something good. And then you'll need, this is the FX798T right here. This box is empty now, but that is my go-to camera. I did recently get a new camera, but it came in at 4.7 grams, so it was a half a gram heavier than this camera, so I'm sticking with this camera. Also inside are the Strix motors from RMRC, and I fly this using the 200 and some odd mAh Whoop batteries. You got Whoop Juice, we got Power Stix, and the MyLipo batteries. And it flies pretty well. Our flight time's right around 2 minutes, which is going to be short for some people, but we have to compromise. You may also be looking at putting the B-Brain flight controller in there, but this is a lot less expensive. This board itself was $16, and then you add a satellite receiver, so you've got another, well, depending upon where you buy it. In my case, the Lemon satellite was only $5.50 from Lemon RX. So for about 20 bucks, you've got the equivalent of the B-Brain in some fashion. Banggood also has their new one coming out sometime soon called the B-Core. But this is something you can do right now, and you can do it in your free time and have some extra fun flights. I'm going to roll the flight footage next, and then if you want to stick around and watch the build, it will follow the flight footage. Okay, here we go. we've got this pigtail, which I'm not going to use, and the camera we need to make sure it FPVs. And we are going to use the leftover pigtail from this camera here. So if I get the right board here, the camera will sit somewhere, maybe not on the board, maybe out in front or something. And I'll cut it, and I'll solder it on here, and then I'll use the remaining lead to make it our battery lead, and we'll use the same sort of batteries we would to fly this. Not the stock ones, not these, but batteries like these. You might recognize those from my past videos. So that's why we'll use this, and that will work just fine. So I've already done a little bit of the work here with my base plate, make sure I get this right way around. And all I did was I took some packaging. This actually happens to be from some old Dell RAM. I just had the packaging laying around. I laid it over the top, and as you can see, I've got a little line around the outer edge. I just traced it, and then I put dots where the screw holes are. And then I used a match and some needle nose, held on to my little needle, and just made a little hole. The hole might not be enough. You might have to wiggle it around a little bit. But I suspect the screws just need a little bit of help to start getting through there, so I'm not terribly worried about the size of the holes. But we'll find out. First thing we need to do is disassemble. You should take a picture of this board, just in case you wanted to go back if something goes wrong. Take a picture of it so you get the motor leads laid out. And notice that how they're labeled on this board. These, I had 2 more of these that just came in a day or 2 ago, not that long ago, so it's probably not just the first run from the factory, but you'll notice that the minuses are always to the right, and the plus, or the positives, are always to the left, and it's the same way if we turn this board around. But that's not right. The motor labeling is correct for the black and the white wires, but it's not for the blue and the red. As you can see here, they've got the blue going to plus, which is not its ground, and then they've got the voltage going to the minus. So they've got those mislabeled, so we want to make sure that we can get this back to its original form. You can use this video, but you can take a picture of your own, and that way you can always go back to this board if you choose to. So now that you've got your picture taken, hopefully, let's remove the motor wires. Start disassembling this. Clean my tip. Try to keep my hands and face out of the way here. Be careful not to touch any of the other components. This one's really top. Alright. Now let's unscrew it. This is just a little screwdriver. It comes with a lot of ready-to-fly quads. I'm going to keep these screws. Then we'll do a dry fit with the template that I made. I'm going to pull that out in this. Whoa. Looks like I did a fairly decent job. We should be all clear there. Alright, now let's remove the props. I use this little guy, CHP 170. Just kind of get a hold of the props, or the motors at the bottom part, and we just want to get right down in that little gap between the prop and the motor top or the frame. We just want to get these underneath there. We're not crimping them, we're just getting them under there and lifting. Usually these things come flying off. And they can be difficult. Sometimes. Now we just push our motors on out from the bottom with our fingernails. Support the top so not to getting the struts out. Don't want to damage the frame. You could use just a frame. I've been waiting for weeks for my E101 frame to show up, so I decided to go ahead and do this. it hasn't changed location according to the shipping, and that's never a good sign, right? Oh, we got these wires. I like to save these motors just in case. I usually go with an upgraded motor. In this case, I'm going to go with the Strix motors from Ready Made RC. And if you didn't see my last 6mm motor test, I'll put a card to it right up here and you can watch that. But those came out on top for just maximum thrust test. I'll go ahead and remove this sticker if I can. There we go. Last motor. Okay, so now we're done with these. Let's see if my screw holes line up well enough to where we can use these. I think so. I'm going to get them started flat. I'll use this as a little bit of padding. It's a little bit hard to do when I'm this far away from it. It'd be easier if I could get my face right up close. My vision isn't outstanding. I do wear glasses. Feels like it went in a little bit. Sure enough, went into my foam tape too. Excuse my reach. Okay, I'm going to go with a different method. Needle nose holding method. We still have enough of it sticking down below. Not squeezing too tight with the needle nose, just enough to Alright. Eyeball this a little bit. Yeah, looks like I did a fairly decent job. Okay, so if you have other screws, you can go in through here. If not, we can probably just use a bit of foam tape, or it might just be fine the way it is. Let's put the board on here. A little bit of support out here won't hurt, but it really doesn't give very much. We've got just enough gap right between here that we should be able to put our motor wires, feed them up through there. But I think before we go much further, what we need to do is we need to get our receiver connected. Also with this board, this is a SP Racing F3 Evo board, and I've tried to flash Beta Flight 3 on this, and I have failed. So if you have any tips on that, I've read all sorts of stuff. I've tried different baud rates. I've followed the drivers, the instructions that are listed on the Banggood website. I've tried downloading a tool straight from STM Electronics, I believe it is. All sorts of different things, and every time I click the flash firmware button, I get the serial port, fail to communicate with serial port, and then my COM port that was detected or set up as I plugged it in, it goes away, so I have to unplug it and replug it in and try it again. But so we're going to keep that in mind. I'm going to be running this with the stock firmware, though. I still think, even with the stock firmware, it'll give us more flexibility, of course, than it would stock. I am going to be using a Spectrum satellite receiver, and you may be using the same thing, but these are the ports up front for the Spectrum, so I'll need to cut this lead super short and get that tinned up and ready to go. Okay, I got my little lead that goes into my Spectrum satellite ready to go. I just need to tin it up, and normally what I do is I place it on my blue tack. Fun fact, this blue tack is not so blue, right? But there's some competition out there in the market. This is also called Fun Tack, but it's a blue. Blue tack, fun tack. Ah, who'd have thought? Anyways, works the same. This is an awful large chunk I got here. And this one's a little bit more sticky right now because I've been using this little ball for several months. A little bit goes a long, long way. Let's try the fun tack out. Stick that on there. Make sure all my threads are together. Got our soldering iron nice and hot. So we just get in and get out. You can see you get a little bit of burn back. Those plastic wires tend to shrink up. If the manufacturer happens to be watching, please just send us all silicone wires like these. They're great. They don't burn back. They withstand heat a lot better. And that would help us all in the hobby a little bit. So this normally it just plugs in like this. Goes right into that port. Oh, one other thing I like to do. See how these pins are a little bit raised up here? I take this little guy and I clip those pins off. They're only there for soldering that port in. And you could take this port completely off if you wanted to. Save yourself a little bit of weight, a little bit of space. But I'm going to clip these off. Oh, I didn't get that one very good. And I have never had an issue doing that with this port coming loose or anything on me, so I think that's a pretty safe thing to do. So again, here are the 3 ports we're going to up here. And this is our 3.3 volt. This is our ground here in the middle. And then this is our X3. And that's our signal wire. I keep one of these around that came with one of the original Lemon satellites I have, so I always know that the white wire is my signal wire, the black wire is my ground wire, and the orange wire is my voltage wire. So let's tin this up now and get it ready. That looks good. I'm going to bring it up closer to my face to make sure I didn't get too much on there. Alright, looks good. I'm going to flatten this out a bit. Solder this on just about straight, like you see here. Cleaning my tip again, nice and clean. Give it a little pull test. Looks good. This will connect up just like so. And then I should be able to fold it over. Use a little foam tape right there, just to kind of keep it from wobbling around. Something else I'll do is I'll cover this in electrical tape, and I also add a little dab of hot glue on each side. The case that it came out of has little arms that help to hold the little antenna wires in place, and I'm going to replace that with just a touch of hot glue, just in the smallest of locations right there in between the solder joint and the wire insulation itself on each side. While we're waiting for the hot glue, let's take a look at our device here. And this is motor 1, these 2 pins right down here in this box, motor 2, 3, and 4. We need to tin those up, and I'm going to go ahead and tin up ground and voltage as well. And I'll probably go ahead and tin the top and the bottom for the battery lead. Alright, we got everything tinned up. Board's pretty warm. We should probably let that rest. We don't want to get the board too hot, and when you're working with smaller electronics like this, what you're trying to avoid is if the board gets too hot and then the solder joints for anything that's on this board gets a little bit warm, they might shift. So you want to get in, you want to get out. You want to have a good hot iron, but you don't want to stick it around long. And as you can see right there, I need to add some more to that. It sunk down. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right as we speak. Now I have had someone tell me that if you tin from the bottom, that gravity tends to pull it through. But if that, and that works to a degree, you just probably have to add a little bit more solder to the pad. So you can do it that way. As well. Let's see if that hot gun is now warm enough to where we can secure these antenna wires a little bit. Try to do this so you can see it, in case you want to know. Just a tiny little bit. Add a little bit more down here. Alright. Let that cool a bit and we'll pull those strings off of there. Okay, So now that we've got that set up, let's get our original board and let's weigh the difference. This means a lot when it comes to these tiny little micros. 3 grams. And the original, 2.3. So we gained a little bit of weight, but not too much. That's to be expected when you're adding a receiver. This is about a gram and a half itself. So we're in pretty good shape there. I think it'll be just fine, especially with those Strix motors. Okay, let's bring our frame back into place here, and we are going to use this foam tape. Actually came with the receiver. This is what comes with it. I doubt there's much of a difference. Depth looks to be about the same. This will be easier to separate than this little piece up here, so I'm going to go ahead and use this. Just going to size it up. Take any old pair of scissors and not cut my wires off. And you may want to use 2 pieces of this foam tape, and I'll show you why just in a second. It's largely a non-issue, I think. But here's my USB cable that I use for flashing. And when you plug this in, get it the right way around. If it's too far down, you may be prying your board up off your mounting plate. So if you have that issue, or you want to, kind of double up, you can use a second piece of foam tape underneath the bottom to raise it up. You will need to hold on to the board every time you plug it in or pull it out, though. And you can see my Spectrum satellite is not blinking because I have to go into Clean Flight and tell it to bind. There's actually a CLI value. So if you're using this, you have to set up your serial RX and make sure you're on Spectrum. This is a DSM2, so Spectrum 1024 or 1048, sorry. And also you need to type in the CLI set underscore spectrum set underscore bind equals 5. And then you save, you type save, you exit, and then when you put battery, this then blinks and you bind it to your radio. And because I'm going to be putting the board in the center, which is a best practice, you always want your accelerometer in the center so it doesn't necessarily yaw funny. It would have very little impact on this, but center is always going to be better. I may want to use 2 pieces of foam tape, and I've also got to get it between these ducts so it fits without giving us any problem. Looks good so far. Let's put our motors in. I've got the motors in now. You can see I've got the motors with the white and black wire here and here, red and blue here and here, and we will solder up those to the pads closest to it. But I haven't cut these ends off just yet because I need to route these wires underneath here. There's some little hooks and I wanted to use those. You don't necessarily have to, like on the Blade Inductrix they don't have these little hooks, but it's a decent idea. Keep the little wires out of the way. And hopefully you can see that. There's a little clip here. The motor should go under it and then along this seam and then down through there. But of course to get through there I'm going to have to cut the end off. But I wanted to route the motor wires first. And I wanted to bring that to your attention in case you wanted to use those as well. So once you got them and you pull on them a little bit, you can see that they kind of hook in and lock in place underneath there. So I'm going to do that to all 4 motors. We've got our motors in. We've got our wires threaded through our little gap. Now we need to tin up all these wires so we can solder them down to our flight controller. I do that with my fingernails, just a little bit of fingernails. Just kind of grab the end, pull it off. Usually does the trick. You can also use a little X-Acto knife or something. Whatever works for you. This part's going to be very difficult to see. There's not a good way of showing you. I've got a little bit of exposed wires and I'm going to have to tin those up. So I'll apply more solder. Solder. The black one's really hard to see. Everything's black behind it there. I found a blue gap. Got a little bit of solder that flaked off down here. I don't want that getting on the flight controller. I'm shorting something. Solder ball. Okay, we're ready now to solder these down. And let's see, we point this forward. Minus. There's our black wire here. White wire here. Blue wire here. Red wire here. And the same on the other side. Let's do that. I better get my needle nose back out. I'm going to have to do this a little bit backwards. So the minus pads are now towards me. Those are our grounds. And you can cut these shorter and put them on the board, and that's fine. It's just when they get too short, you know, it's hard to get your hands in there. Moving around on me. Well, time for the blue or fun tack. We'll use them both. It might wobble, but it won't scoot around on the mat now. I'm right this way, this way. Give everything a little pull test just to make sure it's on there pretty good. That concludes the hardware portion of this show. So now I need to get it connected to Clean Flight and get my receiver running. I've got my Spectrum now set up and working with my Devo 7E. And I've got Deviation TX running on this. It's the firmware that runs this controller. Great controller, really flexible. And I think it's 65 bucks. So I've been looking at this, and I forgot to do something, didn't I? I don't have a battery lead on here. So let's go ahead and do that. So our camera is going to sit about here. So I'm going to cut this about there. And then we'll do the same thing where we just pull off a bit. I know you probably can't see what I'm doing, but these wires are so tiny. There's no good way of showing that. Or at least I'm not aware of a good way to show that. These threads are so tiny. And you might be curious about me twisting these wires. It's something I've always done. I think I've said this in other videos. My dad's an electrician, and when I was a kid working with him, make a few extra dollars, that's what he always did. And he told me to do it too. And I would think after, geez, I don't know how long he's been an electrician. Almost 40 years. He should know something about these wires, even the little ones. So now I'm going to tin up both ends. So I've been looking at this, and my stack's kind of high. And the camera is going to sit, you know, somewhere. Well, let me get this back down here. Camera's going to sit somewhere back in here, and we might not be able to see our hoops in our video. And I kind of like seeing those. It also gives us a little bit of light reflection off of there, so we know if the machine's working in a proper manner, or if it's giving an SOS code or something. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse course a little bit in what we've done to date, and I am going to remove my little plastic sheeting that I made. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. If you'd rather not see the hoops, this is probably going to work better for you. But I'm going to remove this and just stick my double-sided sticky tape directly down to these little supports. There's 3 of them here, and that should give us plenty of support to support that stack. Now what it does do is it makes getting to the USB port a pain. But we should have enough flexibility in our tape to where we can still access the USB port through the back. But I'm going to give that a try. Sinking that board down worked pretty good. It fits real nice inside of there. You can see from that profile shot, no USB access. So we will have to change this or pry this up in order to get our USB cable in there. But I'm going to go with it. Now we just need to get our camera sorted out. I've got my receiver down. There's a little bit of foam tape underneath there, right here. Keep it off of that flight controller. And I've got a little printed camera. This is actually for the blade inductrix, but these holes line up just right. And I'll end up with a little extra tilt because of my receiver, but not much. And as you can see, we've got a little bit of give there too. But I'm going to go with mounting it with these 2 holes. But the first thing we need to do is get our camera on there. And you can see I've got my battery lead in underneath, and we just need to match these wires to those wires. That shouldn't be too difficult. Might be a little bit challenging, but time and patience can overcome many, many things. Clean my tip again. Hopefully the leads don't come off of the bottom. Let it cool a second. Little pull test. Little pull test. I think we're good to go. Get our screw back from my mounting plate. Again, you can use something like this if you want to. If you don't want to have to bother sinking this down. Oh, and I should add, I did have to cut that bottom nub off of back here in order to get that. But if you're using this plate, remember that plate went clear back here. You can use some foam tape to help secure that down. So let's get this on here. These printed mounts can sometimes be kind of fragile, so don't try to force them flush if they don't want to go. We just want to hold it in place. Make sure we don't have any wires stuck underneath there. There's one, it's kind of down. You don't have to set the motor PWM rate on this board because it already comes with the motor PWM rate at 32,000. So we're good to go there. And our camera should just squeeze in there. Maybe. Come on, go down in there just a little bit more. I have a feeling I'm going to end up shearing off this backside a bit. See how they printed the hole? These wires are supposed to go through there. We could do that. But I just want this side to go in a little bit more. Okay, I had to step away to get that camera. I had to get a little bit more force on there. Hopefully your camera fits in there just as well. But I've got my T909 out. Let's plug it in. Let's arm it and make sure our motors spin. Alright, so we got a picture. Let's arm it. You can see the blue light down in there. Alright, so it seems functional. Let's put the props on. Take it for a spin. One more thing we need to do. Or I'm going to do. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. I am going to model this after what I've done with this one so that we can run these batteries a little bit easier. And I'm going to cut off the front plate here. I'm going to just chop out a little bit on each side of here, and I'm going to take this completely off this one here. Let me point from this way so you can see what I'm pointing at. I'm going to take this completely off. Let's try to get it level. Snip. Make sure you don't get your motor wires in there. Snip. Oh, I can trim that one a bit more. And taking a bit of the front out here. see. Is that enough? Nope, I need to take a bit more. So now these batteries will slide through there. And I'm also going to use some loom bands. We've got these nice little points here on each side. And I'm going to take the band from one side. And I'm going to put my finger on it so it doesn't come flying off. Oh, and it did there, see? Saved having to find it. And do it again. These loom bands, you can buy them online from Amazon or eBay. I got a package of, well, my girls actually had a bunch of them, but I couldn't find them. I don't know what they did with them. So now we put our battery in here. I might have to do something with that adhesive. My battery's sticking to it. Our battery will stay in there because the loom bands will hold it down. Yeah, I think I'm going to have to put something on there. It'll get dirty over time. As long as I can get the battery in and out, we'll be fine. Okay. I think we're all set to go fly. Let's give it a go.